So, hello everyone, and welcome to another indie author interview. I am joined today by Amanda Briar, who is the author of the Dawnland trilogy. The first one is Dawn of Hope. Oh my gosh, look at that. Look how shiny that is. Um, yeah, so thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right into it. Tell me a little bit about what made you want to be an author and what your path to publication through indie was.
So, reading has always been like a huge part of my life. And ever since I was a kid, reading Harry Potter and lots of other things, I was like, oh, I want to do this one day. Like, I always had that drive to want to tell a story that made people feel what I felt.
Yeah.
And then life was different. Life went in a very different path. I actually went into science. I went through a lot of school and I just kind of always thought I'd just be a reader and I would never do it. And then I had a baby.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just don't know if this is the right path for me anymore. And my husband was actually the one who was like, why don't you try to write a book? And he's like, you've always wanted to do it. Why don't you do it? And I gave him every reason why I couldn't. And then I was like, maybe you're right. And so that was kind of like the deciding moment that I wanted to change what my life looked like. And we decided to do indie publishing mostly because like he really wanted to also like start a business and learn how to grow something. And here we are.
That's awesome. I love that, you had that support. I think that's a really big, important piece of indie publishing, especially because,
Huge.
right, like it's a business, whether
Right.
whether we enjoy writing or not, it's still a business. You got to make money.
Right.
So I think that
Right.
that's good to have that support behind you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, how do you write? How did you write your first book? Did you plan? Did you plot? Did you plans? What did you do?
So I say that this was like after I had my baby thing. I actually decided to try it when I was in grad school. Uh, One time that I was in grad school, and that was the first time I tried to write the book. I wrote 30,000 words.
Wow.
And then I realized that there was absolutely no story, that I had no motivations for my characters, that I had no idea what I was doing. And then all the doubt creeped in and I put it away. And I was like, I'm, going to more school and this just isn't going to happen for me. So I actually started like thinking about this idea 8 years ago, 10 years, something like that. It was a very long time ago that I tried it the first time and didn't work. So then fast forward to 3 years ago, I basically started over. I still had snippets of scenes that I saw in my head that I had tried to write before that I essentially planned the entire series around.
Hmm.
And so I take a lot of time for my fantasy ideas, plotting out the entire thing. So I know everything that's going to happen, every big thing that's going to happen. I'll say that from beginning to end. So I am a plotter in that way. But how we get there as I'm writing can change. So I call myself a plotzer. About the 3 years ago, I had figured out all the big things, and then I sat down to start trying to write it. About it. Oh God, how many years ago now? A year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. My timing with children, just I can't figure it out. I can't remember things. But once I actually started to sit down and write it, it was like finally coming out after all these years of thinking about it. So it took me like 2 months, I think, to write the first draft. So yeah, I'm a plotzer. I know the big things. I know how it's going to end. I know the surprises and stuff that's supposed to happen. But sometimes when I write, surprises come up, and I'm like, oh well, I didn't see that coming, but here we are.
I love those kind of surprises. Then it
Right.
makes writing fun. It
Uh-huh.
definitely puts that, kind of puts you in the reader's shoes, like figuring those
Yes.
things out.
Right.
So what do you enjoy most about writing fantasy? I mean, I love retellings, reimaginings inspired by fairy tales and mythology. That's my thing. So when
Hmm.
I heard what this was about, I was like, yes, gonna need that. So what do you enjoy most about writing fantasy?
I feel like what I like the most is just anything goes, right? You don't really have the confines of our world. You
Yeah.
can kind of, if you want magic to make something happen, it makes something happen, right? Within reason, obviously,
Yeah.
because you have to fit the rules of the world that you create, but it's like you get to just make something that you want. And um having that like fantasy, wrong word, but like fantasy of things that are magical and that don't happen in this real world just makes it enjoyable and fun. Now, don't get me wrong, I love contemporary stuff too. And one day that'll happen for me. I'll write that too. But um, I wanted the magic and the feels that come along with writing fantasy, you know.
Yeah. No, totally, absolutely. And so when you're writing, what do you need in your space to stay focused and on task?
Staying
Quiet?
focused is yeah, right, right. And I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I don't get that
Yeah.
very often. But yeah, I it has to be silent. And not all the time silent. Like I do have some things going on sometimes, depending on how much time I have. Sometimes there's princess movies playing in the background. Other times it's silent. But staying focused is actually a huge struggle for me. A lot of times I have to do writing sprints. And that's the only way that I can get it written. This book was actually written in 15-minute increments. The
Wow.
whole thing. Yeah, the whole thing was written in 15-minute increments. It was tough, but I was like learning my ways and learning how to write a book. And it was the only way that I figured out how to do it. Um, Lots of writing during nap times, lots of writing until 2 in the morning. So staying focused is the hardest part. Well, one of the hard parts for me.
I mean, I completely relate to that. I can't for me, I can't focus at home. I cannot write at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's just too comfortable. So I
Mm-hmm.
have to go to a coffee shop and put on my noise canceling headphones and just focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have
I
ADHD.
wish.
I have
I wish I could do
ADHD,
that.
so it's
Uh,
definitely difficult to focus,
mm-hmm.
which is part of that. But
Right.
does that kind of fit into what your kryptonite as a writer is? What gets in your way?
A little, but I feel like I overcame that because I kind of figured out how timing worked for me and I figured
Yeah.
out a process that worked for me. The biggest kryptonite that I feel, okay, and again, this is my debut novel. I'm brand new. I'm learning. I'm trying to have that learning mindset, right? But the biggest thing I think for me is fear,
Yeah.
right? So fear is what kind of kept me from doing this to begin with. Fear of changing what I thought my life path was. Fear of comparison. Oh, I play the comparison game so much in my head. And I think that if we're talking about one thing that's my biggest like roadblock, it's writing my characters and loving my characters and then going to read because I'm a huge reader. And then I'm like, but is my character good enough compared to this
Yep.
one? Because I love this one. And so that I think has been the biggest stumbling block just for progress. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think comparison is, I mean, especially with social media, is just so difficult because you're like, oh,
Yes.
you see these authors at the end of the year posting, oh, I'm a six-figure author, seven-figure author, and they're indie, and you're just like, how? What are you doing
Right.
that I'm not doing or not, able to do too, right? I think
Right.
that
Right.
everybody is at a different place in their publishing journey. Like you said, this is your debut. I mean, I'm releasing my debut in a couple of months. It's hard. It's
It
hard
is hard.
and I mean, I think that I kind of figured that out and I didn't start even writing and really thinking about doing my own book until I interviewed quite a few authors, but
Uh-huh.
it's just it's really hard to be indie, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time there's so much freedom to that. So
Yes.
it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't,
Right. It's
and
like you have to learn how to go with and work with the path that you chose and
yeah,
know that there's going to be difficulties in either path, but you
yeah.
just have to be able to push through that for yours.
Exactly.
And like you said, you see the wrap ups and you see the I've published this many books and I've written this many words and I've, gotten this many followers and all these things. And you're like, oh, I've been working so hard. Like, why aren't I? But you don't know where they've been on their timeline,
Right.
right? And so it's so hard with this snapshot of social media to compare timelines. And I think that also brings the fears back up of well, what if mine's not good enough? Why is, this person taking off and this person's not? And I love this book and I want my book to be like this book. And why isn't it? And it's just that perpetual fear that kind of social media can create. And coming out of that and kind of focusing on remembering that you love your characters and your book, otherwise you wouldn't have written it,
Yeah.
is something that I have to do every day, literally every day.
Well, I think that's great advice, especially, one of the questions later is about advice for, aspiring authors. I think that's good advice to remember that. I mean, I think it's the most important to write the book for you. Like, it's great if
Yes.
people like it. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Like, you want it to be successful, but write it for you because in the end of the day,
Yes.
like, you're the one who is like, oh, let's talk about Lennox and let's, talk about Dane and like, let's, figure that out. So
Right.
let's go and talk about why Dawn of Hope is an amazing debut and why you should be
Thank
proud,
you.
so, so, so proud of it. If you
Thank
had to
you.
describe this book in one sentence or less, what is that sentence?
Well, I'm really long-winded, so I have a very read-on sentence.
Okay.
So Dawn of Hope is a new adult fantasy romance about a secret princess who goes on a journey with a stranger to find a cure to save her mother in a mythical island.
I love it. Oh, love it. I love
I
it.
have practiced that. I have practiced it. It took some time.
Which that's a thing too, right? You also need to like get a really good hook. So when someone comes up to
Yes.
you for book signing or something and says, "What's your book about?" You're like, like,
Blank.
right,
Absolutely blank. Like
right.
everything just disappears.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And
And
then you're like, well, how am I supposed to say this without spoiling what happens in the next one? And then I'm
exactly,
just
because
going to
you
not
know what's
talk.
going to happen, but we don't know what's going to happen.
Right. I
Maybe most
do.
of the time. And so, who was your favorite character to write and why?
Well, my favorite character to write might be a spoiler. So I'm going
Okay.
to pick a different one. I know you've read it.
But
So
maybe
you can
maybe
probably,
my listeners, watchers, whatever. That watcher sounds creepy, but yeah.
yeah, subscribers. Yeah. Viewers works.
Yeah.
So they haven't. So I'm gonna pick my other favorite. I loved writing Finn. Finn is a little boy, and one of the reasons why I loved writing him was because I really wanted that like childlike innocence to come through in the story. And um, there's not a lot of kids in fantasy books.
Absolutely. And
And so it was like,
actually, never mind.
what? No, go ahead, say it.
I was gonna say when there is, they die.
I'm a mother and I will never write a child who dies. Okay. Like I can't do it. I never will.
Yeah,
I promise you
I
that.
don't think
Couldn't handle it. I can't handle it in books that I read.
yeah.
So that will never happen for me. Not for my writing journey. But for him, like I loved writing him because he was so innocent and so sweet.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to give something to Lennox, my main character, that she never had before. And part of that was a childhood, and part of that was this innocence and this lack of responsibility that she didn't grow up with. And so I kind of wanted him to be that for her, but then also tie in that Neverland Lost Boy kind of mentality of, the children that live on this island. So he was a lot of fun to write.
I love him, and I think that that was such an important character to put in because it kind of, I mean, that's Neverland, right? That's what we think
Right,
about. Um,
right.
but I know, I mean, young adult and adult are like very, popular and publicized, but new adult, right, is
Mm-hmm.
like that 18 to 26, right?
Right, right. That
So
like middle group.
so I love that you wrote in that new adult. When I saw new adult, I was like, ooh, I haven't read a new like I literally don't think I've read like a new adult since like I don't know why it just comes to mind since Addicted with by Kristen Becker Ritchie. Like I was like,
Hmm.
oh, new adult. Like that's what that I think of. Um,
Right.
and so on the flip side, who was the hardest character to write and why?
Ah, this is again spoilers. Oh man.
I know.
Um, I so I think honestly, Dane was the hardest one for me to write
Yeah.
because again, you get that comparison of the male main character that you love others that other people write and you want people to love yours as well. And I had never really written like the book is in first person perspective, right? And obviously I am in first person perspective. So writing a male character was a struggle for me just because I wanted to make sure that I got the voice right.
Yeah.
And I know we don't see from his mindset, right? We don't see that in the book, but you still have his interactions and his mannerisms. And I like wanted to get him right. And it was difficult. And I, hope I did. But I also hope I did for my own personal reasons, which
Yeah.
I'm not going to share. So
And do you have a favorite scene or a favorite quote from your book?
my favorite quote is the one that I put on the sticker.
I was, I literally just thought about that. I'm like, that's my favorite quote.
Yes, that is my favorite quote. It's funny because my editor jokes with me. She's like, I'm going to get that tattooed on my body. And I was like,
Yeah,
no,
it's
you're
so good.
not. I was like, please don't. That gives me so much anxiety that you're going to have my words on your body. But for anyone who hasn't read the book, the quote is light always finds a way, even through the blackest woods. And that is on the sticker with I think I have it here, the special editions
Yes,
in the special edition boxes for book one.
yes.
It's not going to be in the book two box. Other things are going to be in the book two box.
I'm excited. I'm excited. Um, and so sometimes when we write, we imagine characters to look a certain way. We have like aesthetic boards and this and that. So is there anybody who exists in the world today that inspired what Lennox and Dane and or any other characters look like?
Inspired?
Yeah.
Yes. Lennox, no. She just kind of exists. I have no idea where she came from. And what's really funny is I don't see faces when I write.
Hmm.
Weirdly. So I can't just like say, oh yeah, it's this actress and they're kind of
Yeah.
mixed together. I don't see it. And same with Dane and Finn and Edmund and all of them. So but I will say inspired by I have watched The Last Kingdom. Have you ever seen that show on
I've heard of
Netflix?
it.
Okay. Amazing. Watch the show. It's probably one of Netflix like best shows
Maybe I'll
ever.
have to watch it while I crochet.
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect. But Uhtred is the main character in The Last Kingdom, and he is a Viking that was raised in like by the British. And so or no, it was switched the other way around. I can't remember which way it went. Anyways, Uhtred, he's a Viking. And so he kind of is the inspiration for Dane, this like broad, long haired Viking vibe kind of guy. And I also mix Dane together with like the look of Charles Vane from Black Sails. I don't know if you've seen that one.
I've heard of it again.
So good.
Like
Like those
I
two are
love
like
I love
probably the
pirate
most,
stuff.
yes,
Like I
exactly.
don't
Yes. So Dane to me he's obviously younger. He's in his early 20s, but he is kind of this mixture of uh Uhtred and Charles Vane. And that's actually where Dane's name came from because I am a terrible namer and I hate naming characters. And in The Last Kingdom, they talk about the Vikings as Danes
yeah.
instead of saying Viking. And so his name just was Dane.
I kind of love that. I love that. I also like hate naming because I'm just like I don't even know like what name like
Yes.
vibe.
Right.
I asked who ended up being my betas. I'm like I have these two names. Like what do you like better? And they're like I like that.
Mhm.
Okay, that's it. That's what it's gonna be.
Perfect. But once I name a character, their name can't change.
Yeah,
It's done.
yeah.
Like once I write a sentence as them, that is their name.
No,
I
absolutely.
tried to change Lennox's name once. Awful.
I love
Awful.
the name Lennox. I think that's such a cool name. I mean, it makes me think
Yeah.
like Lennox, like the, you know,
Yeah, I
fancy
love it too.
stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love that name. Okay, so let's go to the last part of the interview, which is just me asking fun questions, things that I would want to know. So, other than reading, writing, and being a mom, what are some hobbies and things that you like to do in your free time that you have? Your
Free
minuscule
time.
time that you have.
Yeah. I mean, we go to Disneyland. Obviously, I'm a Disney person. That's where I got this idea.
Yeah,
My husband and I were, when I lived in LA for a while, we would go to Disneyland all the time. And uh, I was sitting in Fantasyland one day and I was just like, and just, saw this image. And so that's kind of where it went. But we're big Disney people. And when I have vacation time, that's where we go. Free time, laundry, dishes, like
all that fun stuff.
normal things. Otherwise, I'm reading, and writing.
Well, let's go to reading then. Let me get my Goodreads open here.
Oh
And then
God.
you can tell me some authors or books that you'd recommend.
Okay.
I see a few
Um,
on your shelf behind you I've been staring at. So,
right. I mean, I have a lot up here.
yeah.
My shelves are slowly shifting. So they have like categories. This side is the adult fantasy side that's slowly getting bigger as I actually purchase the books and
Yeah.
not just read them on Kindle.
Yeah.
And then I have it's blocked by my microphone, but my contemporary romance side over here, and then YA is in the middle, except for that one. Right there. That's not YA anymore. But me personally, it's funny. I feel like I've changed a lot as a reader
Yeah.
because I've obviously been reading for years and years and years. But now as an author, I read differently. It's like I read for enjoyment, don't get me wrong, but I feel like every author has something to learn from. So I feel like everybody that I read, I'm like, I recommend them for different reasons, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like every piece of writing, every story has something that I can, oh, I see how they did that, or oh, I see the wording that they used, or oh wow, look at this story arc, or look at these plot twists or whatever. Um, so, you know, things that I obsess over or books that I've obsessed over Zodiac Academy.
I love
I
Zodiac
haven't
Academy.
finished the series yet just because the books are so dang long.
I know.
Um,
I I mean, maybe through them. They were, oh my God, Restless Stars. It should be on my shelf over there. Um,
yep.
but their new series that they came out with
Uh-huh.
is really, really good. It's like
Okay.
more different. So, I mean, they have so many interconnected series. I did not stop like I was supposed to. I read all through. Um,
Nice.
uh, Kristen Umlong told me, she's like, you should stop and you should read
Mhm.
the Dark Fae, and then you
Yep.
read the Ruthless Boys. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm just gonna. I wish I did. But so if you haven't made your way completely through them yet, just look at a reading order and maybe do that.
Okay. I'm on book 8 of Zodiac. So
Okay,
yeah, I'm like, I need to finish through 9,
me too.
but just what time do I have to do that? It's hard enough when I'm drafting and editing, but I love them. Love Hannah Nicole Mayer. I have assistant and
Yeah,
apprentice up
yeah.
there. Obviously, love Sarah J. Maas. I read ACOTAR in 2015 when it came out.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I am an old Throne of Glass. You know.
oldie, oldie fan. So I miss like I'm not part of like this big hype, right?
Yeah.
Because I had to wait for
Yeah.
I didn't have a binging
Exactly.
opportunity. So love Sarah, obviously. Carissa Broadbent, love her, love Stacey
Yeah.
McEwen, JLA. Like there's so many that I read and just like get inspiration from, I just finished Helen Shurer's Blood
Yeah.
and Steel series, and
Oh, the
she
spinoff. I cannot wait for the spinoff.
I cannot, it's already pre-ordered. I'm so
Yeah.
excited for it. I just feel like she does such an amazing job of plot versus romance versus
Yeah.
spice. Like it just is perfectly done throughout 4 books. Like there's so many, there's too
Have you
many
read
people.
the Ormir Chronicles by her?
No, I have not.
I
This
read
it
those
was
a
my first
long time
one.
ago. I read them a long
Really?
I was like reading it and I was like, Helen, sure. Sounds really, really familiar. And then I looked back and I was like, oh, that's because you read those three books. So she has
Right.
those. Those are really good.
Okay, I'll have to go back because again, the TBR is forever long. Oh, LJ Andrews.
Yes.
Love hers too. I read The
I read
Ever
the Ever
King
King.
recently.
Me too. Me
Loved
too.
it.
I did the audiobook. I fell in love. I was like, oh my God.
Loved.
I am scared to go like on that 9 book journey for the other one because
Right. Me
I
too. Me
I
too.
couldn't do another Zodiac right now. And I was like, no,
hmm
like you have to be patient. Like finish this one first and then you can go to that
Right.
one.
Right. I'm exactly the same. I read the first book of her first series and I was like, oh my God, I can't do 9 books right now. Like, I just don't have the time. And then I went and read The Ever King and I was like, well, I am in love with Eric Bludsinger.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to have to go back.
Yes.
But yeah, love her stuff. It's just, there's so many people and this goes into the comparison game that I was talking about earlier,
Exactly.
right? It's like you love what
Huge backlist.
these authors have written and you have these huge backlists and you're just like, how can I do this? And then you have to remember they have these huge backlists. Like you're
Yeah.
reading their newest books and there's so much growth and learning that I'm sure they have gone through that I'm going to go through. Like I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just people are amazing. The work that people have put out is unreal.
Totally. Totally agree. Um, and so, in talking about advice that you would give to either an aspiring author or a younger you, what does that look like?
Don't be afraid. That's we talked about fear before. Don't be afraid to do something that you've always wanted to do. Um, some of this advice I feel like is very specific to my reality and my experience. And I know won't necessarily apply to everybody, and that's okay. But for me to tell my younger self, I would tell her, don't push aside dreams that you wanted because somebody else told you that they weren't worth it.
Yeah.
That they weren't they weren't going to make you enough money. They weren't going to
Yeah.
be, important enough for your life. They weren't going to give you security or stability. Um, when I kind of started all this and my husband and I were talking about it, I didn't want to look back when I was in my 70s and go, well, what if I would have tried, because I thought that my life was supposed to go a certain way. Along those lines, I am somebody who has a lot of student debt for a career that I don't have anymore. And another thing that I want to tell my younger self is you don't have to necessarily, and I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but this is my experience. You don't have to go to school or pay for super expensive courses to learn.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities to learn. It's like it's a human thing to want to learn, and we are able to do it whether we have specific instruction or not. And practice, 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 practice. And so like I only took Brandon Sanderson's course on YouTube. Like that's the only creative writing I've ever done.
Oh,
He's amazing.
I've read all of it. I'm on Yumi the Nightmare Painter, and then I have the Sunlit Man coming out, and because I did the graphic audios. I've read everything. The
I have not.
dynamic fantasy is just he's insane. I
He's
mean
insane. He's insane.
the
Like I've
the
only read some of it.
I
Go
mean
ahead.
the thickness of the books. I mean he had to get a different printer for Wind and Truth because it was so big, and they were like, we can't do
Right.
that. He's like, okay, I'm gonna find somebody else, and he printed
Right.
somebody else. It's crazy.
And he did. Yeah. No, he is literally the GOAT. I call him the father of fantasy
Yeah.
and Sarah J. Maas the mother of fantasy, right? Um, but that is literally the only creative writing I've ever taken or done. And it's a free resource and he wants
Yeah.
it to be that, right? And so that's like something I would tell my younger self is don't be afraid to learn earlier. Like I wish I would have learned earlier and taken advantage of my time when I was younger.
No, good advice, good advice. And um I think it's just so important to remember that. I mean, especially as an indie author, you learn by the seat of your pants and you learn from
Yeah.
your community as well. So
Yes. Yes.
there's really a great indie community
Mhm.
out there. You just gotta find them. Um,
Right. Right.
and so we talked about how you do like silence, but sometimes you have like little princess movies in the background or whatever. Are there any songs or anything that like inspired this book or like that you think of when you think of your book at all?
Songs for this book specifically, no. I do listen to film scores. So if I do need some sort of noise, usually when I'm not noise overwhelmed from screaming children all day, I listen to a lot. I have a playlist of, it's like, I don't even know how many hours of film scores. And to me, the film scores are really inspiring because the music just makes you feel, right? And
Yeah.
you know what's going on in the scene and you can feel the tension and you can feel build up. And so I think that helps me a lot when I'm writing scenes. But for this book, there isn't something specific that I could like tag to Dawn of Hope for like inspiration or anything. There are quite a few songs that I hear that I have an entire book idea like
Yeah.
plotted around a song or the feel from that song, but that's not this one yet.
Is there anywhere that exists in the world or any fantasy worlds that you weaved together as inspiration for this book?
Well, Neverland, obviously. And
So shiny. I just love it.
I know the special fancy editions are just I love them so much. And the hardcovers too are like my favorite. My husband actually designed the books. He did them all
Really
himself.
cool.
Yeah, so well, under my direction because I gave him lots of input. But yeah, he did it all. So he's my formatter, my cover designer, my graphic everything. But yeah, the Neverland is a big part of it, and that's the kind of the vibe that we wanted people to get when they looked at the book with the dust and the gold and the green and the um, that kind of magical feel.
Yeah.
The Blackwood itself is kind of I don't want to call it Game of Thrones inspired, but it's just kind of that like medieval castle
Yeah.
vibe that we kind of all know. It's foggy and cold, and honestly, I was thinking of Forks when I read it. Like, going way back to I read Twilight when it first came out
Yeah.
too.
Me too.
So that kind of cold, wet, isolated feel, but give them castles and swords.
I love it. I love it.
Mhm.
And so is there anywhere that we can meet you? Are you doing any signings or anything, any special events coming up at all?
So yes and no.
Anything,
I actually what?
anything you can say.
So I'm not going anywhere big. Okay. I still feel like I'm in my imposter syndrome stage where I'm like, I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And I kind of I want to have all three books out before I do that.
There.
Okay. So like forward planning, I plan to have all three books out this year.
Wow.
So maybe next year. Um, but as of right now, no big conventions. I am going to a local bookstore for a signing soon. Um, but I have no idea what that's going to look like. It's like my first thing. I'm excited, but I'm also terrified.
Yeah.
Um, and it's local to me, but I'm in California. So if I do plan anything, I probably will plan California conventions first to kind
Yeah.
of get my feet wet. Obviously, it's a big state, so it's not like there's going to be little travel. It's still big travel, but just kind of getting my feet wet with that maybe next year. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, that'll be exciting. I'm sure everybody would love to meet you and get a signed copy. But they can always order a signed copy from your
They
website
can.
and special
Yes.
edition, which you should totally get. I'm a paperback girly, just am. So had to pick
That's
paper.
why I did both because some people
Yeah.
are.
I don't like hardcovers. I don't know why. I just don't.
It's
So thank
okay.
you so much, Amanda, for taking time to talk with me today. I've gotten to learn so much about your writing process, and it's been really wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a ton of fun.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.